Call to order the August 17th, 2021 meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with the applicable law. This meeting of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted both in person at the meeting location at Town Hall and via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting live may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26, or may go online at www.northandovercam.org. In-person attendance of members of the public and board members will be permitted, and every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time as well, via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite our best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, a transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceeding as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in public hearings but not attend the meeting in person, please email your question or comment prior to or during the meeting to Jean Enright at JENRIGHT@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. Jean, since we are partially hybrid, could you take roll?
Sure. Peter Boynton.
Here.
Alyssa Koenig. Here. John Simons.
Here. Apologies for being late.
Eitan Goberg.
I am here.
And Kelly Cormier is absent tonight.
Okay, very good. Thank you, John. All right, so this works out well. We'll get right into it. Bond release, 247 Chickering Road, Luke Bouchard, Enterprise Bank, request for release of a $10,000 performance bond associated with the site plan review special permit approved in June 2019 that allowed for construction of a 3,200 square foot bank with a drive-up window, parking, landscaping, and stormwater improvements. All right, Jean, we have a built bank.
We have a built bank. The site was constructed substantially in conformance with the approved plans. As you can see, pictures have been provided for your review. The decision and the as-built stamped by a project engineer have been included in your packet. So I recommend full release of the $10,000 bond.
Okay. We have a motion to release the bond associated with 247 Chickering Road.
So moved.
We get a second?
Second.
All in favor. We'll start with Peter.
Aye.
Alyssa?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I vote yes. All right, bond is released.
So I'll say that the site did come out really, really well. So.
Yeah, nice job. 325, continued public hearing. 325 Johnson Street, Kevin and Allison Sparks, watershed special permit application to request approval to construct a detached garage, expand gravel driveway to access new garage, install drywall to capture roof runoff of new garage, pump, crush, and fill with sand old septic tank cesspool, connect to town sewer, and connect to gas. Work is proposed within the 100-foot non-disturbance zone and within the 100 feet of the wetlands. Jean, why don't you tell us where we're at? Let us know what's happened since our last meeting, and then we can hear from the applicant and board members.
Yep, so you may recall at the last meeting, stormwater peer review had not been completed. It has since been completed. The peer review engineer has signed off that all her outstanding issues have been addressed. The application needed to go before both the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Conservation Commission. It did go through each of those in August. The Zoning Board of Appeals granted the variance that was required for a new structure within the non-disturbance buffer zone. And the Conservation Commission opened the hearing, and it's anticipated that they will close and issue an order at their next meeting.
Okay. So from our perspective, is there anything outstanding?
Nope, you asked that I draft the decision pending the review of the other boards.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to add?
For the record, Jack Sullivan, I'm the project engineer, but nothing to add. I think Jean covered it.
Okay. I believe, Peter, you were not at the last meeting when this came up. Is there anything that you wanted to add or questions?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything, other board members? Any questions or comments?
No, it's fine.
Any members of the public have any questions or comments? Jean, have any questions or comments come in through email?
They have not.
Okay. So no board members have questions or comments. No members of the public have questions or comments. Nothing has come in by email. Applicant doesn't want anything else to say. So I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion made by John to close the public hearing as to 325 Johnson Street. Can we get a second?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor. Peter?
Aye.
Alyssa?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I vote yes. Public hearing is closed. We will now review the notice of decision.
Okay, so I just noticed prior to release of the bond is repeated, so I will strike 28 and 29.
Oh, yep. And you've seen, you've seen the limitations, and I know you've done other projects, you've seen the limitations on fertilizers, non-organic pesticides and stuff like that, just make sure.
Is the deed restriction correct?
Okay.
Yep.
All right, just want to make sure everyone sees that. Okay. Anyone have any questions or comments or suggested changes? Other than we're going to strike 28 and 29 because they're repeats. We need a motion to approve the watershed special permit for 325 Johnson Street as amended.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor. Peter?
Aye.
Alyssa?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I vote yes. 4 is what you need. You are approved.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Gene.
You're welcome, Jeff.
We will now continue to 733 Turnpike Street. Ann B. Lee, Lovegreen LLC, application for a common parking area and multiple use facilities special permit under Article 8 Supplementary Regulations, Section 195, 8.8D5 and 195.10.7 of the North Andover zoning bylaw. Applicant seeks a special permit to allow for relief from parking space requirements due to the hours, days, and/or peak parking demands for the uses on site being so different that a lower total will provide adequately for all uses or activities served by the parking facility. Property is located in the general business zoning district. All right, Gene.
So, as you likely recall, the owner of Jasmine Plaza would like to lease space to a juice type of operation, which has been deemed a restaurant use by the Inspector of Buildings. The business will not have seating. The total number of on-site parking spaces for this use, in addition to all the other uses on site, is not sufficient, according to the zoning bylaw. The plaza currently has 73 delineated parking spaces. According to the zoning bylaw, including this proposed use, the mix of businesses require 138 parking spaces. The intensity of use is contributing, the intensity of the restaurant use is contributing to the issue. The restaurants in the plaza include Dunkin' Donuts, Captain Pizza, and Sanju Restaurant, in addition to this juice operation. The parking requirement for restaurants is 15 per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. These restaurants, along with the proposed restaurant, require 102 spaces on their own. So at the last meeting, we talked about if a special permit was to be granted by this board for common parking, that it should be specific to this type of restaurant use. And so based on the feedback provided by the board at the last meeting, I've drafted a decision for your consideration. In order to tie or restrict the special permit to similar types of uses of restaurant use in the future, findings of fact number 2 and special condition 14 specify the following. Findings of fact: the use was as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood character. The proposed restaurant use hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Wednesday through Sunday. There'll be no seating, as this is a to-go operation. Merchandise offerings include but are not limited to cold-pressed juices, packed salad, and vegan vegetarian items, which will not require long cook times. Juices will be prepared and ready for pickup. And then, as a special condition, the special permit is being granted with the understanding that the proposed restaurant use hours of operation are 8 to 2 on Wednesday through Sunday. There'll be no seating at this, as this is a to-go operation. Merchandise offered is included but not limited to cold pressed juices, packed salad, and vegan vegetarian items, which will not require long cook times. Juices will be pre-made and ready for pickup. Thus, future restaurant tenants on this site shall not benefit from this special permit unless the restaurant use is deemed by the Inspector of Buildings and Planning Director to be of similar size, meaning 1,000 square feet of gross floor area, and of similar operation. No indoor seating, to-go operation with similar pre-packed merchandise, and hours limited to daytime operation.
Okay, and so I assume the applicant understands that if there are changes to her business model, so say instead of 8 o'clock, she wants to be in at 7 o'clock or stay till 2:30 or something like that, she needs to come to you to determine whether or not that's a minor modification, you know?
Myself and the Inspector of Buildings.
Okay, right. So, I mean, got to live by this, but if there's slight changes, you know, we can be flexible, but you have to talk to Gene ahead of time just before making those changes, okay?
And there's a process, should it be deemed substantial, you can modify the special permit. So
Right.
that would be the extreme side of it, is if it's not deemed insubstantial, you go through this process again in order to modify the document.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments? Peter, anything from on your end? John, was anything?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. How's Captain Pizza doing with the?
They're going to be closed for a little while.
So it seems like, again, we'll come back to this. Just a little bit off topic. It seems like this has been a somewhat common trend of cars through buildings in kind of strip malls. Not here, but just overall. I mean, we had it at the Panera, had it here, just in town, and then other places.
So the building inspector in a TRC recently, within the last 2 weeks, indicated that he'll likely require bollards when parking spaces face buildings in the future.
Okay, and I don't think it's.
When they come right in.
Yep, and I don't think it's limited to yours. In fact, I guess we should actually talk about that in the Royal Crest thing. But it seems to me whenever there's kind of these first floor retails with cars pulling right up facing the building, that there really should be some sort of barrier, whether it's a bollard or a higher parking. There should be something, just because it's happening
too
more and
often.
more frequently. And I think a lot of times.
Weren't open.
Right, we've gotten lucky a bunch of times that I mean, the Panera one, we've gotten lucky. So, okay, very good. I'm glad you're on top of that, and I hope more people take that approach as well. Okay, that's good. Okay, can we get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion made to close public hearing as to 733 Turnpike Street. Seconded. All in favor? Peter?
Aye.
Alyssa?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I vote yes. Public hearing is closed. Can we get a motion to approve the special permit?
Yes, I make a motion to that effect.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Peter?
Aye.
Alyssa?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, special permit is approved. Good luck with your business.
Get in touch with me and I'll tell you the next step. Okay.
Okay, Planning Board Inclusionary Housing Bylaw. Discussion item, right? We're done with hearings, right? All right, discussion item, Planning Board Inclusionary Housing Bylaw. All right, Jean, why don't you tell us where we're at and what you think we should kind of be discussing today?
Okay, so included in the packet was the same draft that you received on July 20th. Since that meeting, I've sent the draft to several developers and requested comment. I did receive comment back from Avalon Bay's attorney that attended all the hearings for the Avalon Bay development. I've met with Suzanne Egan, Town Council, to go through those comments. Unfortunately, the day after that meeting, she went on vacation for a week and a half, and so she is going to redline the draft bylaw to account for those comments. So many of them were valid, and some we discussed and maybe not necessarily include, but I will share those comments with the board. I'll share the red line edit from Suzanne with the board.
So if you were to paraphrase the feedback you got, what was it?
So I saw some of the feedback. It was very specific and technical.
Technical and attorney type comments.
Okay,
So that's
as
why I went
opposed
straight to
to
Suzanne.
Broad public policy.
Correct.
Okay,
I think a
fair
lot
enough
of,
then.
yeah, and I think that's what, I mean, I think there was some, and this, I think when you, the reason we asked developers, isn't it? So we asked the developers from Avalon just because we have a relationship with them from having worked with them. There's not like a new Avalon coming to North Andover, but it's
Yeah.
just helpful from, you know, we're taking this from the housing, you know, tenant perspective, but it is good when you're drafting the bylaw to kind of get that feedback from a developers, because we don't want this to be overly burdensome. We don't want it to stymie development, but at the same time, we want it to be appropriate and really encouraging affordable housing. So a lot of the comment, some of them were more, I'd say, hey, this might be overly burdensome to development, and sometimes you have to take that with a grain of salt, you know, because that's who they're advocating for. But a lot of it was just very technical. So some of it, I think, you know, Gene and I kind of walked through and talked about it. That might make sense to kind of look at, or nah, you know, we've kind of been through that and we've talked to the state and they really like this kind of model. So it was kind of technical.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely at a level where I didn't think I could address the comments without talking to Suzanne. So I would say
Yeah,
of
okay,
legal
fair
nature,
enough,
most
yeah.
of them. So I also sent the draft bylaw to a representative at Department of Housing and Community Development and Mass Housing Partnership. So Mass Housing Partnership has somewhat of a specialist that deals with these zoning bylaws. And I'll say her initial feedback was she found it to be a solid draft and very reasonable, but she also has some comments. So I'm meeting with her and the representative at DHCD next Tuesday in preparation for them appearing at your hearing on September 9th. So they're going to come in and speak to the bylaw and speak to just inclusionary zoning in general and try to give you some context in terms of it being applied in other communities and results in other communities.
Yeah.
So,
And is there any, like, empirical research about the impact of these?
yes, so that there is, and so Dan, who's on the call as well today, has done a lot of research with, I think Kelly at the last meeting wanted surrounding town data. We've also have town data that we actually used to construct this. So the surrounding towns and cities aren't
Well, it's not
necessarily
so much the surrounding towns as, like, how do you know it works? How do you know it's good? I mean, how do you know it creates any more affordable housing than you would have gotten otherwise? Or
So-
through other approaches?
So we can have numbers of affordable
Yeah.
housing and how many it's created.
Yeah.
It's a maintenance tool, John. It's not going to get us to the 10% on its own, but it's a tool that helps maintain once you do get there.
Yeah.
And gives you some control over where the housing goes. Initially, there wasn't a ton of production, but different communities have experienced a lot of successes and others haven't had much success
Yeah.
at all. And I think DHCD will help speak to that.
It seems to me that it's, unless it's going to be large multi-families, you're not going to get much bang out of this particular bylaw, right? Because if you're building 20 units, 20 new units, then you need, you know, 3 or 4 affordable ones. So you're not going to get that many, but it's nice to have those. But like Gene said, once you get to the kind of level of affordable housing that you want, now how do we know how much affordable housing we want? I don't know. We're just kind of talking about the state numbers. I mean, I guess we're kind of just assuming that that's the appropriate amount of affordable housing, or at least a minimum. But it helps keep you there to stop falling below that 10%, that at least when you're building bigger complexes, you know that you're going to get something out of them.
Yeah, and I mean, had we had it for Princeton and Minco and Avalon, I mean, we would have had meaningful units in those developments. So,
I think this is a long-term thing where we're not going to see the effects of it until long-term. So, you know, looking at maybe other towns that have had this in play for several years, whereas if you were looking at someone who's had it 1, 2, 3, you're not going to see the long-term effects. This is something that's going to have to go for a while.
yeah. And so I've also sent it to Minco, who said that they will submit comments, and I've shared it with Trinity as well, who's looking at it in context of what they're proposing and what this requirement is. So I hope to have feedback from all of those entities by the September 9th meeting. And like I said, the September 9th, I'll share all the information and the research we had. I just didn't want to overwhelm everybody with these spreadsheets and more get a sense over the content. And so I've summarized some items with Aton in terms of just key bullet points of what this bylaw entails in that 8 or more units, 15% requirement. It allows for payment in lieu, it allows for off-site. So I guess it would be helpful to just have a sense of the board as to whether that content, before we get into the weeds of the legal language, is what the board envisions.
So, in terms of, I mean, does anyone have a sense if they, I mean, I guess some of this we'd like to hear probably from these experts, right? Is 7 or 8 the right, is that the right number? It seems to me that's kind of like an appropriate number, 8 or more. I mean, it seems like if it's smaller than that it would be pretty burdensome on a developer to do that. But once you're really talking about 8 or more units, that it's appropriate to at least have one be to have this apply. That it would be 15%, because if we just do 10% or 11%, we're not really maintaining. At least 15%, we're definitely maintaining the numbers that we're at. I like the idea. So we have bonus provisions, meaning you get if you do it anyway, like more than you have to, right?
Yes. So there's one for volunteer
Right.
affordable housing, so you can get a bonus for that. There's one for floor area ratio. You can get more floor area ratio if you give more affordable units, and then there's a density bonus.
Okay. Does anyone have any issues with a payment in lieu potential system that you have an option of either building it, and if you build it, it's got to be the same as all the other ones. You can't build inferior units for the affordable versus the market rate. That's in the bylaw, but there are a lot of these bylaws and ordinances across the Commonwealth have an option where if you're building owner ones, instead of building them, you can pay into the housing trust or build off-site, and it's just a way to kind of give the town and the developers options of how to make housing.
And so I've drafted the payment in lieu to be for home ownership type units, because I can envision a subdivision at 9 units requires 1 affordable unit. That developer may choose to pay in lieu into the housing trust, but we already have a housing trust with a pretty substantial amount of money in it that it's very difficult to spend that money. There's 2 paths: spend the money that generate a unit on our SHI inventory, but there's also first-time homebuyer rental assistance, things like that. They can contribute to affordable housing as well. And so there's kind of a balance there. You don't want an affordable housing trust that can't spend the money, so you want to make sure we give them avenues and that the funds don't just sit there either. So,
John, for the CPC, where in the last few years has the affordable housing money kind of been going? Is it mostly towards the housing authority projects?
Yeah, we give $100,000 each year to the Affordable Housing Trust, but really all the money's going to
the housing
senior
authority.
housing. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Affordable Housing Trust had partnered with Bread and Roses. They're going to do one-off affordable housing units, but they are looking at partnering with the housing authority in the Fountain Drive area to potentially develop a new building.
We still have significant needs with the housing authority, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, and it's good. I mean, it's kind of, it's nice to sometimes have those one-off things where you can just be like, okay, here's $100,000 for the housing authority, go fix your roofs and stuff like that, and not have to get it from CPC or anything like that. So, I mean, it seems like a good option to have, and I think I like how the bylaw kind of gives us flexibility on that. Okay. So I think we're on the right path. I mean, does anyone have any kind of overarching concerns about the bylaw other than how much impact it will have, but just about the bylaw itself?
Yeah, I would say, like, of the developers, so I sent it to Princeton, Minco, Avalon, and Trinity, and no one responded like, oh no, don't do that. Like there was nothing. It was, yeah, I'll take a look and I'll try to provide comments. And I thought that they were meaningful, the ones that we did receive. So.
I mean, it seems
Well, I mean, practically speaking, given where we are in terms of our land use, it's only going to impact multifamily. It would be I can think of only a half dozen parcels or less that could impact single-family housing, because there just isn't that much land to build a large
Yeah.
residential subdivision.
I think I said at the last meeting, in 10 years, I don't think we've had one for more than 10 units
Yeah.
in a subdivision. I mean, that next large parcel that goes, could it be a subdivision? It could be a subdivision, and if it were, then
Yeah.
them providing affordable housing, I think, is commonplace at this point.
Hey, Tom, this is Peter. Can I ask a question?
Of course, thank you, Peter.
So the audio kicked out between you saying, does anyone have any comments? And then when Jean offered her comments. So could I ask John, I think it was John talking, could he just summarize the response he had?
Peter, what I said most recently is this will, given our land use patterns in North Andover, will really only impact multifamily housing for the most part, with very few exceptions, because there aren't very many really large parcels of land where you would build a residential subdivision today. And Jean said that over the last 10 years, there hasn't been a 10-unit subdivision in all that time. So that was just my point, that this will skew to multifamily housing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And just to add, it's my intention or understanding in the bylaw is that it's for new units. So like if there was a current 10 building subdivision and they were able to find one more unit in that subdivision somewhere, that doesn't make this apply because it's one new unit. It's not just because it's already 10. So it would have to be 8 new units. Or even if they tore it down and you had 10 and you built 10, I still don't think that would apply. It's about the new units. So, yeah, I agree. I think it's really just about if you know you have a larger apartment complex. Or, it also could potentially apply. Gina and I were talking about this earlier today to a senior living, that kind of establishment. But Jean, could you just talk more about what we have in place already for that and how the kind of options there?
Yeah, so I have to look through the bylaw in more detail, but I had a summary memo at one point. The reason I didn't include continuing care retirement centers is because that is an article of itself. It's Article 16 in our bylaw, and that already provides a provision for affordable housing. And so when Edgewood was created, they actually paid in lieu for all of their units, and they seeded the Affordable Housing Trust for, I think, $800,000. So that bylaw already has it, so I need to weave into this language to say, with the exception of that, senior housing, because it's covered. And I want to look at the planned residential development as well, because we also offer some bonuses in planned residential for density. So I want to make sure there's no conflict between that bylaw and this as well. So I have a note to do that. So there's some areas in the bylaw that we've already got density and affordable provisions.
Right. So we'll just, if you go through the senior care one, you'll be exempt from this because you're already contributing under the established. So this won't take away that. Okay. So I think it's in good shape for where we've started. I'm looking forward to hearing from these other experts and kind of getting their opinions about how it's worked in different places. If there's anything we should be wary of, the successes, if we have any data, things like that, that would be really helpful. Okay, we'll just keep pushing forward. That sounds great. Okay, next up, Royal Crest Estates, 1 and 28 Royal Crest Drive, Trinity Financial, Jim Keefe, proposed master redevelopment plan for the property. I have on the agenda tonight that will be presented a revised program summary. We'll be looking at a detailed dimensional analysis, architectural renderings, 3D imagery, and some elevations.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you, as always, for having us. We've got a large contingent here today, so I'm not going to introduce all of them, but I am going to introduce our architect, John Martin, as well as our landscape architect, Andrew Arbaugh, who is actually online, who will be walking you through a video that we plan to show you. So I'll just give a brief introduction of what we're going to do tonight, where we've been, and essentially where we are in the process. We wanted to really present to you, so remind you of where we've been with the plan, what we've been hearing, how we've been listening what the plan looks like and has looked like since the last time we met, what the numbers look like. But really, we want to give life to those numbers and to those plans. We want to show you what this will really look like. So the team has really been working hard to do that and to really show you images of what this will really look like once it's built. So Gene, if you could go to the next page in the introduction presentation. So this is just sort of a recap of the process that we've been going through. So we've had over 90 meetings, and we've communicated with more than 4,000 people in town. This has, been a broad cross-section of stakeholders. We've met, obviously, before this board many times. We've met with neighbors. We've met with other town boards and commissions, merchants groups, church groups, and other interested parties. We've really been out there introducing the plan, introducing the plans, and getting feedback. We spent a lot of time listening. We've heard many thoughts and comments about the plan, both positive and negative, and we really, took that to heart. And I think that that's reflected in the plans and sort of the process that we've gone through. Generally, people agree that the property is outdated, it's tired and inefficient. We've gone through that many times. It really needs to be replaced. So we've been spending all this time really, looking forward, looking for a plan to replace this eventually over time, working with, everybody in town as well as the residents at the property. People generally like the idea, things that we've heard, people generally like the idea of a walkable community. A variety of housing types, including affordable housing, which we were just talking about. They like new open space and parkland, and they like modern, energy efficient, and environmentally sustainable buildings. Some of the concerns that we've heard, and we've heard them, were generally about property line access, screening, and these are coming largely from abutters, and buffering. Proximity of our proposed walking path to the property line at certain locations, the operation and orientation of the proposed student housing building. Drainage and stormwater retention is something that we've heard a lot about, and we've really spent a lot of time working to address. Density, obviously, and building heights. So as a result of all of this, we've really sharpened our pencils, we've made revisions to the plan, and we think we've addressed the concerns, and we think that this process really has made the plans better. So again, this is a recap. We've talked about this the last time we were here. So the plan itself has been largely consistent, but here are the summary of the changes just to remind everybody. So from our original plan that we presented now a year ago, originally to the board and to others, we've reduced the total number of housing units by 332. So that's over 20% reduction in the housing units. We reduced the square footage of the total proposal by about 355,000 square feet, so a substantial reduction both in the number of units and the number of square feet within the proposed plan. And if you take into account the reduced parking needs with the reduction in sort of the overall density, it's even bigger reduction in the square footage and size of the project. We've reduced the heights of many of the buildings throughout the site, and where we have taller buildings, we've further focused those inward into the site and at the front of the site. So towards the neighborhoods, the buildings have generally gotten shorter. We've significantly widened the landscape buffer at sensitive locations. We've increased the amount of open space by more than 2 acres. We've further developed the landscape design, which you'll see. And our landscape design at this point includes approximately 750 new trees, along with the preservation of many of the trees on the site, particularly in the buffer zones. And we've introduced 50 rain gardens, which we'll get into, which really help us with the stormwater management and the drainage, while also beautifying the site. We've introduced fencing and enhanced landscaping at the property line along Berkeley Road, Quail Run, and Montero Way in order to control access to those properties, and we're continuing to work with the neighbors there to make sure that any of their concerns are addressed. We've made adjustments to walking paths, sidewalks, and bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Again, all consistent with things that we've heard as we've been out in the community talking to people. And we've improved the design of nearly all the building types, and we've improved the massing and setbacks, and we really listened to the feedback we've gotten from the board and from others, particularly about that. So we'll get into that. I'm going to go over the numbers, and then John, when we get to his portion, is going to show you the pictures and really talk to you about the design intent and how we've really worked to address those concerns that we've heard. So on this page, this is the program summary, which you guys are familiar with. This is really the numbers. We've put as many of the numbers on one page as we can so that you can have as much information as we can provide here. It shows in many cases the current program as it's proposed. It shows where we were with the original plan, and it also has notes or references to what's there today. So this is consistent with what you have seen. So we have a total of 1,309 of a variety of housing types. So that's consistent with what we talked about last time we were here. Again, that's a reduction of 332.
And Mike, how many are there right now?
There are 588 housing units there today, all multifamily, all 2 and 3 bedroom, all completely unrestricted. It's not on here, but as you know, we have been discussing, and as you know, we are planning as part of the first phase of this project to introduce a significant number of affordable housing units. So overall, we'll be providing 97 affordable housing units as part of our proposal. To the right of this page, it shows the building heights as they were originally proposed, as well as the current building heights. So you'll see that we've responded to those comments, and we have made reductions in the building heights overall. And you'll see some notes on the furthest right-hand column that shows the actual feet of the heights that we're proposing, as well as some comments there. With the reduction in density, we are projecting a fairly significant reduction in total daily vehicle trips. So our engineer has run those numbers, and obviously we'll be continuing to provide that kind of information. But at this point, we really have a lot of the details to show you. And we've got, beyond just the plans, we can give you, the exact number of feet from property line to sidewalk to building as it exists, as it was originally proposed, and as it is currently proposed. So if you go to the next page, so this was something of a lot of discussion over the last couple of meetings, also at our site walk earlier this summer. So we wanted to give you some of the exact numbers related to the setbacks and the buffer areas. So again, we've really heard the comments, and we sharpened our pencils, and we worked really hard to get as much or respond to those comments as far as it relates to setbacks and buffers as much as we could. So we heard a lot about where the proposed student housing was and how it interfaces with Route 114, the frontage of the site, as well as its abutting neighbors. So the original plan, the frontage, the setback at Route 114 originally was 28 feet. We've increased that significantly. So today, in this plan, it's 47 feet. The proximity of that building to the abutting property line originally was 59 feet. Today, it's 96 feet. And we've also, and you'll see that we've also reoriented the design, so it's reoriented so it's more focused towards the interior of the site and away from the neighborhoods. So that's something that we really spent a lot of time on. We heard a lot of comments about the setbacks on Route 114, and so we really worked hard to accommodate those comments. So in our original plan, we had a consistent setback from the back of the curb line to the buildings of 30 feet. And honestly, we feel that this has really improved our plan. We've worked really hard to both increase that setback overall, but also to provide more variation within the buildings themselves. So we moved the entire set of buildings another 5 feet back, but we've also set the garages within the buildings back even further. So you'll see that when you see the images that John's going to present, the garages are now at 56 feet back from the curb line on Route 114, which allows us more space for landscaping. It allows us to retain more of the existing trees or introduce new trees, and it provides for a really nice, what we think is a really nice frontage and gateway to town. The setback to abutters at the Berkeley property line as it relates to the student housing facility. Our original plan, it was 384 feet away from the property line of the houses on Berkeley Road. Today it's 390 in the current plan. The existing buildings in that area, just as a reminder, and it's something that we went over when we did the site walk, the existing buildings in that area are approximately 120 feet to that property line. So we're vastly, vastly increasing the amount of space between building and property line in that area of Berkeley Road. And then overall, we didn't do it just there. The average buffer all along Berkeley Road on that frontage or that side of our property, our original plan was had an average buffer of 145 feet, and today's plan has an average buffer of 195 feet. So we increased that a lot. The existing buffer from the buildings today as they exist to the property line along Berkeley Road is approximately 90 feet. And then lastly, near the back of the site, as it's closest to Quail Run and Montero and Hillside, the original plan had an average buffer of about 120 feet. In today's plan, it's about 145 feet. And in many, many places, that is vastly, it's a vastly greater distance from property line to building, but that's the average. And then the last page of sort of this introductory presentation just shows you a plan. This one is hard to read, but I just wanted to show you an example of how we've been looking at this. So this layers the existing property with the original plan and the current proposed plan. So if you look closely, you can see, how they interact over time. And we have these all on separate sheets as well, which I'll submit to the board. But this is how we calculated all of that. So we have all of this information. We'll provide this to the board so that you can look at it as well as the other plans. But if there's any questions about any of these places, we can give you an exact distance from existing, proposed to property line or to the surrounding houses, all based within our model. And the nice thing where we are today, and John will get into this, but where we are with our design is that we've got a model built of our plan, so we can give you precise information about just about anything that the board might be interested in at this point. So I will pause there, and I will turn it over to John to present the design, which we've really been waiting for. We're really excited to show you guys, and we think you'll be happy. But please, John.
Hold on. Before we do that, I wanted to see if anybody has kind of
Sure.
comments about the numbers themselves. So does it? We can go back and you can hold your comments and ask after we go through the design. But does anyone have any particular comments or questions just about the numbers? Peter, anything at this point?
Yeah, I was going to wait and hear if others had comments first.
Okay. Alyssa, anything? Or John?
I don't have any comments.
No, the column is, just so I'm clear, the market rate multifamily is down 100, is that 160? I can't read it.
169. Yeah.
The H55 is down 100, and the townhouses are down to the remaining amount. So that's where the decreases came.
That's correct.
Okay.
So the only thing that, I mean, I appreciate the charts. I think you really actually nicely put together what we asked to put together. I think it's helpful to see on the program summary, okay, this is where the original building height, this is the current height, and have those notes. Same with the summary of the changes related to setbacks. On the setbacks, can you explain a little bit? The thing that kind of sticks out to me, I really like the buffers with the neighborhoods, but it sticks out to me on 114 that there are places that are either the same or closer than the existing setbacks. And I guess why that is in the plan.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I mean, to an extent, we're trying to create something new. We're trying to introduce a different type of community here than exists today. So we do feel it's appropriate that we get closer to 114, that we create a little bit more of a street edge, and that, we bring those buildings closer to 114. I mean, honestly, we had to do that in order to provide the buffers towards the neighborhoods, and I think that was important. So it was a balancing act where, our team spent a lot of time discussing, should we push the plan further back? If we did that, it gets closer to wetland setbacks or buffer areas. It gets closer to the property line with the neighbors. So we felt, going through sort of our design process, we felt that this was the most appropriate response, considering all of the variables.
And I see in the current building heights, there are one of the mixed income multifamily, one of the market rate multifamily, and then part of the dorms that are 5 stories, everything else. And then there's a 4 to 5. So there are 4 buildings in total that have 5 stories.
Yes.
Whereas before it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay?
That's correct.
Can you point out where those are on the plan?
Yeah. Maybe I can pull that.
Like, are those on the 114 street side? Are those sideways?
Yeah.
Where are
They
those?
typically are. So this is the student housing facility here in blue. So the 5-story section is the closest, the most interior up to the site part of the building. The legs, as they get closer to the neighborhood, are 4-story.
So on your map going vertical, that's the 5-story
correct.
side. Okay, yeah.
This entire, I believe, I don't have the height plan with me. I can
Which building
refer
is it?
to it here because I've got it. So
5,
yeah,
5, down to 4.
so 5 here. This is 4 on 114, but is 5 on the interior of the site, and this is 4. This is 4. And that's the extent of the 5-story buildings. So again, mostly it stays within this zone, whereas the original plan had more 5-story buildings throughout the site.
Okay. All right. I think those are the questions that I had. I mean, obviously we'll get, once it's kind of settled on what these kind of final numbers are, we'll get updated financials with taxes and students and projected fire and police costs, right? We'll get all of that once we have kind of more set numbers.
Yeah, so that
Yes.
should all be an updated school capacity study and
Right.
fiscal impact analysis. And we
Okay.
kind of push that later in the schedule in order to make sure that there's some sense of this is the plan moving forward.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we, at some point, see those again. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory that if we have some of these less housing, there'll be a less student number, there'll be a lower fiscal number, those all kind of
Absolutely.
percentage-wise change, but we do need to see those at some point,
Yes.
a little further down the line. Okay, Peter, if you have other stuff,
Yeah. Thanks, Eitan. Can you hear me okay?
we can.
Great. Eitan, first I'd start with a question to one of the responses to your question, which was understand why some of the buildings are closer to 114 before. And I'd like to comment on the response to that to your question. So the answer, if I heard it correctly, is that the developers faced a choice of, should they push it back and then there'd be less of a buffer, and that didn't make sense. So pushed it closer to 114, and that sounds pretty logical, as the applicant told you. Look, it's a trade-off. More space by the neighborhoods or by the team. But I think that's, in some respect, a bit of a false comparison, depending on your perspective. I mean, to me, that's pretty clear evidence that there's an awful lot being packed into this parcel in terms of density. And we've talked about density over the last year and expressed our concerns. And if the parcel cannot accommodate both an adequate buffer to the neighborhood and appropriate setback from 114, I just don't agree with this explanation that it's a trade-off. It's one or the other. To me, it's evidence that the proposal is simply too dense, containing too many things to properly fit within this parcel. Now, can it be done? Well, we see the plan here as to how it could be done, but I just want to voice a concern that I just don't agree with the logic here. I mean, certainly I understand if we keep the number of buildings, the density where it is now, then yes, that's your trade-off. But I also think it's a very clear indication that there's too much being stuffed into this parcel because it forces this unacceptable, in my mind, compromise. So that's one thing I wanted to raise, which was just a comment on the response you got to your question. Another thing I wanted to ask about the program summary. I agree with you. Compliment the people who did this in terms of how it's laid out. In terms of format, it's helpful, of course, but you had asked in the prior meeting, Eitan, for a program summary, a spreadsheet. I'm paraphrasing your words, Eitan. Correct me if I'm off track here, but I thought in your role as chairman, you had asked for a spreadsheet that details the progression of these proposals, starting from the program summary that I think we started with in January. So if you go back to January, I thought, spent a great deal of effort with the applicant, and the applicant in turn spent a great deal of effort addressing our questions about not square feet and number of buildings. How many buildings are there today proposed? What's the square feet today and proposed? But even things like number of trips today versus vehicle trips under this proposal. And I'm reading this wrong, but it looks to me like a lot of that information from January, which to me is clearly part of the progression. The point of this was to contrast what we have today with what's being proposed. Now, is that we have more than one proposal. We had the original proposal, now we have a revised proposal to be benchmarked against today. And we had that back in January, but it's wrong. It looks like a fair amount of that original benchmark is gone. I know the applicant, when he was describing the program summary, said, they really hard to get all this on one page. And if the reason that original stuff is gone is because of a page limitation, then get page 2. I need, I mean, I thought that's what you asked for as chairman, Eitan. B, that's what I need to see.
Okay,
So to me, the program summary is not sufficient.
so you also want to see the current. We have some of that on here.
Yeah, but my point is that unless I'm reading it wrong, and please correct me, it looks like a lot of the stuff that you and I both, I mean, you and the planning board both spend a lot of time on. I'm not asking you to do new work. Please, well, I need to see that original compare and contrast from the earlier program summaries. It's very difficult for me to evaluate this now. I can't evaluate this without those original benchmarks that you had already done, so I need to see them back. And Eitan, have I incorrectly characterized what I thought you as chairman had already asked for?
No, I think we had talked about that, and I think this incorporates some of that. But I think there was another chart that we can use that I think you're right was already done, that already had like the current number of people and the current daily trips
Correct.
and things like that.
And current square feet, current, number of buildings, current number, types of bedrooms, all of that stuff. And again, don't interpret this as my asking for new analysis. I'm asking you to put back on, well.
I think it'll have to be 2 charts, but
Yeah, 2 charts, I mean, whatever it takes in terms of format, but I need to see that program summary information back on this comparison. I really can't evaluate it without it. So to you as the chairman, Eitan, I'm saying I need to see that back.
okay, we'll figure that out.
Let me move on to the other things here. I could just ask a little bit. I know there's been a little discussion on the second and third last columns. They're labeled original plan building heights and current plan building heights. Am I reading this correctly that, count the number of lines, that there's, I think, 15 buildings. If you go from the orange at the top to the at the bottom, I think that this is giving us the heights in floors, number of floors for 50 buildings. Is that right?
Is that 15?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so 15 buildings. There's 4 buildings in the orange. There's one in the gray, one in the yellow, one in the blue. So 15 buildings. And am I reading this correctly that in terms of the reduction in height, 4 of the 15 buildings, you're proposing a reduction in height of 1 floor, and 1 of the buildings, you're proposing an increase in height. So the net reduction is 3 out of 15 buildings. Have I got that right?
Yes.
So, I mean, just to me, and thank you, but Eitan, back to you as chair, I actually was quite interested in the early discussions about revising this plan, that some of the buildings are going to be reduced in height. But my impression now that I see this is I'm, tremendously underwhelmed that the net reduction is 3 out of 15 buildings. So again, that's just my view, but I thought it had been characterized differently, that we're going to make a big difference in the heights given all the feedback that we have gotten.
Well,
And to me, reducing 3 of 15, I'm just giving you my perspective. I'm truly underwhelmed by that.
well, it depends on how you view that. I mean, it's 20%, right? I mean, I don't know if you view 20% as a lot or not. It reduces the unit count by 332. I mean, I guess it's definitely subjective about.
So again, my math might be wrong here, but 3 buildings out of.
Well, they took away some buildings too, Peter. They took away some buildings too.
Right. And if I could, I think it's important.
Again, all I'm saying, the only point I was trying to get across here is this. I think, like the rest of the board, I listened really carefully to how this was being characterized. But, maybe I just need to adjust to this. It certainly was very encouraging to hear what you were going to do, but now that I see what it is, I'm just saying the numbers are actually less than the expectation based on what I thought I had heard said before. So I'm just telling you, I am underwhelmed.
Understood.
At
But if I
That's
could,
the reaction. And, I think
if I could, I think
and
it's
I'm explaining
important.
why.
I think it's important, and I
Building,
absolutely.
It's reduced in height. That's much better than 0 out of 15, but it's certainly not what I had in discussions.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Let me just see if I had any other comments here, and I appreciate the opportunity to, ask questions and make the comments. Hold on one second.
So I think
And, also just, I appreciate the clarification when the chairman asked to point out where the buildings reduced in height were located, because on the presentation, the extent that this is used to communicate to the public, unless I missed it, it just doesn't tell us. So again, I appreciate you explaining that here in the planning board, but I wonder if that would be helpful for the sake of informing the public where the reduced height buildings are located. And I don't know if you can accommodate that or not, but
We may be able to do that as part of the video when the video is narrated. Just a couple of clarifications, Peter, and for everyone. So there are actually 14 the buildings, because the one in pink is Town Square, so that's not a building.
No, there's a
Oh,
building.
there's a town square building there?
There is a building.
Okay, that's the one story. Okay, so
Yes.
15.
That's correct.
But one of the changes, well, no, but we have total, okay. I'm just trying to look. There were, some of the townhouses were just taken away, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
So some of the change, it wasn't necessarily taking off building heights, it was actually removing buildings. So
no, and
that's just a different change.
I don't have an adverse reaction to that,
Yeah.
Eitan. I appreciate you pointing that out, but I was not saying that I had a problem with the removal of the buildings. I was just saying that once I saw the numbers that were reduced in height, I mean, based on what I had heard from the applicant earlier, it sounds like there had really been a response to the concerns, and to me, it's underwhelming.
Fair enough. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
So on the height notes column, just to clarify, so it seems that the 5-story buildings, including the roof, are now 79 feet high.
Yes, that's correct.
But when it's a 4-story building at 55 feet, is that inclusive of the roof? There's no differentiation on that one?
It depends, and I think that's where I was going, and I appreciate the comments from the board. But that's where I wanted to make and request that we see the design. We see the design. That I think that if you see what we're talking about, it gives some real context to these numbers on the page. And it gives you an idea about what these setbacks look like. The video that you're going to see and the design you're going to see is taken directly and matches exactly the plan that you've seen and this plan here that has been pretty familiar, but is, we've been changing over time as we've been talking about the comments. So it might be more productive if we kind of go through that, you see it and have some context, and then we can go back to this and really see. But you'll immediately, you'll be able to see in that particular question, some of the roofs are flat, some of the roofs are pitched now, which we did specifically to try to make this feel like North Andover and really get something that we think people will be excited about.
I'm sorry, you said the 5-story building is 79 feet, is that?
Yeah, so you might not be able to read it from there, but so the first building is a 5-story. It's 67 to top of occupiable space and 12 feet for the pitched roof for a total of 79 feet.
79 feet,
But the
okay.
next is a 4-story building that only lists 55 feet, and I think what I just understood is that will be described as being a flat roof versus a pitch.
Okay.
So there's
but-
several buildings that are specified for.
So 79, how many, other than the Mills, which have been there for over 100 years, are there any buildings in town that are 79 feet?
So not that I'm aware of, other than through the mill permitting, the Converse building was often referenced as the former Converse headquarters building as 70 feet high. So Avalon used that in relation to their proposed buildings, which I believe are 55 feet high. And then, obviously, the Amazon building is the next highest building that you recently permitted, and I think that landed just over 100 feet for Amazon.
Yeah, okay, but there's nothing around that, so,
I-
but
not that
there
I
are
can think
no,
of.
that's my point, there are no buildings in town that are 79 feet tall.
Yeah, and I'll note the existing trees as, I mean, we did go out to the site, we did have the balloon test. The balloon tests were at 79 feet in certain locations. The existing trees are, approximately 90 to 110 feet tall.
Nonetheless, there's no buildings in town that are 79 feet tall.
So why don't we go through the video?
Yeah.
But I guess one question I'd have for the architect is why pitched roofs for some are going from 67 to 79 instead of flats on those? Just so that would be good to just hear the rationale behind that.
Yeah. I think you'll be very happy to give you the design
Sure.
intent and what we were after.
Sure.
I want to put this board where you can see it and people watching can see it. Would this be a good location for that?
Yeah. Is it good for Cam? Yeah. All right. It's good.
I also need to put it where I can see it. Okay, good evening. My name is John Martin with Elkos Manfredi Architects. And I want to take you through this video and address maybe some of the questions that we were just talking about. I want to show you the route we're going to take in this fly-through so that you have it in your head where we're navigating. We're going to start above 114 and come in and move along the frontage along 114, along the multi-use path, passing 4 multifamily buildings separated by 2 garages. And as Michael has already alluded to, the multifamily buildings at their primary faces are set back 35 feet from the street edge. The garage is set back 56 feet from the street edge. After walking down here, we'll turn the corner and we'll see quickly the town green, which the green space itself is a little over 2 acres. If you include the Festival Street, which you will see a photo in the video as well, it's a little over 3 acres of open space for public amenity. At the corner, we do envision a small footprint grocer, some other ancillary retail in this building that anchors the corner. You'll see all of that. As we move into the project, we'll take a quick look to the right down the residential street, and you'll see those 4-story buildings lining both sides of that street, which is 80 feet wide, a very pleasing proportion of height to width, 55 feet to 80 feet wide, 55 feet tall to the cornice line. We will catch a glimpse of the hotel, which is a 102 key hotel. The street width on the street that comes off of 114 is also 80 feet. You'll get a sense of that as we move through there. All 3 corners that have buildings on them of this primary intersection are anchored by some sort of small-scale retail, cafe, bakery, a small shop. And then as we move back into the site, the 4-story multifamily building will be on our right. There's a small little bioretention green strip there that brings the wetlands through and connects them into the town green. And then moving back furthest into the site, another multifamily housing building that steps down from 4 stories to 3, providing transition to a series of townhomes back here connected. And to our right, at the end, we will turn and begin to walk on this constructed wetland in this 23-acre buffer. Most of this is preserved area. There are some reconstructed wetlands which we're reconstructing to provide better biofiltration and a more sustainable solution to the existing wetland conditions that are there. We do envision making boardwalks across some of those constructed wetlands to provide an amenity. There is a 1.2-mile running and jogging trail that encircles the whole 76-acre development. And as we've said, 23 of those 76 acres are set aside for open space, another 2 or 3 at the town green. So we end up with 50-something acres of developable land. That's a lot of land that can support a lot of housing with the small amount of retail that we envision here. So that's the route that the video will take us. And with that, Gene, I'll ask you to play the video.
So before we play the video, I'd ask board members, John, I'd like you to go through the whole video, narrate it. Let's hold questions or comments until it's over. And then if people want to go back and ask about specific points in the video or questions, then we can do that, okay?
Yes, and Gene, before you hit play, I will say one other thing. The imagery that you see here is representative of the buildings that will be designed and will be brought before you as a planning board. These are not final architectural solutions. What we are committing to tonight is the height and the width and the geo-positioning, if you will, of the plan on the land. And the architecture is designed to convey an intention. None of these buildings have been specifically designed in the way that they will be designed once the project is permitted and each individual lot comes before you. But as Michael said, they're intentional, they're aspirational. They talk about the type of architecture and the kind of feel that we want this place to have. We're very much involved in making a place here, making a place that people want to come.
So how is the video, can you tell us how the video is made? So like, if we see a building and it's got, 3 things of windows and one of them, could we assume that on the plan that we've been shown that that's a 4-story building? And can we assume that if these buildings are in comparison to each other, the heights is set out in the plan that we've just talked about? Is that
Yes,
fair?
yes, absolutely. Heights, roof pitches, width of buildings, even materiality is intended here. What I mean that they're not designed is that the exact window patterns are not yet figured out, and whether it's a 6/1 double hung or a 2/1 double hung, that level of detail is not intended to be committed to in this video.
But we can take this, so just this still shot that we're looking at, we can take that this is a, like a four-story, I think, right?
Yes.
4-story building with, is it 5? Well, 5 with the top, is that 5?
It's 4 here, 4 here, steps up to 5 right at this corner, stays 5 all along here, turns here, and then steps down to 4.
So-
Eitan, I apologize, but I can't hear the comments while the architect was facing the drawing. Could
Okay, yep, just speak into the
you
microphone.
repeat it so the audience can hear them?
Okay, so, but the point is where on the plans and on the summary, you say that there's a 4-story building with a pitched roof, we're gonna see a 4-story building with a pitched roof.
That's correct.
Okay.
And just to anticipate a little confusion, one of the, if you will, architectural devices that we're going to use is even on our 5-story building, we're putting that 5th story, the building's facing 114. We're putting the 5th story in the attic. So the cornice line will be at the 4th story, and you'll get dormers, shed dormers, and doghouse dormers that are that 5th story. You can see it in this still. The 4-story building has no interruption in the roof. The pitched roof is uninterrupted. It's just pitched. And that's why, in answer to your question, Gene, whether the eave line is at 67 in a 5-story building or 55 in a 4-story building, the ridge line is a consistent 79 feet because in the 4-story buildings we don't have occupancy in the attic, and in the 5-story buildings you'll see that we do have occupancy in the top attic. So they all read as 4-story buildings on 114 with dormers.
Okay.
Okay, you can This is above 114. We're going to fly in and move along that multi-use pathway there. The pathway meanders because we are going to preserve as many trees as possible in that existing right-of-way, but we are going to provide that multi-use path. The architecture is vernacular, North Andover, New England architecture with stone and brick and bay windows and oriels and dormers, a kind of neoclassical Georgian vernacular New England architecture. The buildings all change their material and express their base, their middle, and the top. We're moving into the second block here, where you see a cast stone base, a brick body, and a wood or fiber cement attic story. As we come across here, you see the little bridges that connect the parking garage, which is set back further to both residential buildings so people can park in the garage and go directly into their floor. And then as we begin to turn the corner, the residential ground floors that had fitness centers and common rooms now give way to retail at the ground floor with hopefully a small footprint grocer at the corner. As we turn in off of 114 and we look across the 2-acre town green, we see the biofiltration along the sidewalks and the green lawn beyond. Again, preserving trees against 114, preserving trees at the edge, creating the open lawn in the middle. We see far beyond some suggestion of the student residential, and then in the immediate foreground, we see the hotel, which anchors the whole composition. The open space is intended for both active and passive recreational uses. We anticipate a fountain, a cafe, a kiosk, hardscape along the edge of what we're calling the Festival Street, which fronts the hotel where the porte cochere is. That street can be closed off, not dependent upon that for circulation around on a day-to-day basis, so it can be closed off in the evenings to let activity spill out onto there. As we come back to the intersection, you see each of the corners held by these small cafes, and then we're going to turn right and look down the residential street, which is framed by 4-story buildings on both sides. And as Michael has already said, as we come off of 114 and get into the development, the pitched roofs go away and we move to a flat roof typology, more of a mercantile building, loft-type apartments to provide a variety of different apartments among the multifamily product. These have residential units on the ground floor with a green buffer that buffers the sidewalk and front doors that open up onto these stoops, as you see. Moving by on the left is the little green pocket park that anchors the edge of the hotel. And then moving back, again, one more street back into the development, you see the woodland on the right, the multifamily building on the left, that the material changes from brick and stone to cast stone and maybe wood or fiber cement panels above. 4 stories, now stepping down to 3 stories, making a transition to the wood frame townhouses that characterize the back blocks against all of the neighbors. On the right, I've mentioned the naturalized area. We're going to take a quick look down this residential street and see a series of townhomes. Those townhomes will be developed to a 3-story height like this, but again, this is just placeholder architecture for what the specific architecture of those townhouses might be, but they are intended to come and meet the street the way that they would in a New England village. And so now we're going to walk, looking out beyond is the green buffer that keeps us from seeing the houses behind us, and now we're turning in on that 1.2 mile walking path that goes through what is a preserved and naturalized woodland with some constructed and reconstructed wetlands, all indigenous plants, all climate resilient plants designed and chosen for their ability to manage the stormwater on this site. And so as we cross this bridge, we're going to leave you in the middle of the woodland, and we welcome your comments.
Okay. So why don't we do board members, and Gene, we'll see if there's any public comments, either in here or that have come in. So why don't we start here? John, Alyssa, and then we'll go to Peter. Is there anything you want to ask about or question about in the video? Specific things?
If we go back to the very beginning,
Can we start at the beginning?
okay, stop. Okay, so first thing, that, the part of the building exactly on the right there, that's 5 stories, right? That's exactly what you said, where you put the 5th story in the,
Well, it's 4 stories with 2 false windows in the attic for architectural effect. No one
Okay.
lives up there.
okay.
That's a
okay,
4-story
so
building.
Okay, so I've just counted 5 up. So
Yes,
it's-
that's
it's
a
architecture.
good
Okay.
question. I'm glad you asked it.
Okay. Okay, the trees in front of there, some of them are 40 feet tall.
Yes.
You're going to plant 40-foot tall trees?
Well, a lot of those trees we think we're going to be able to preserve. I'll let Michael speak to the exact caliper and height of the trees that will be planted.
And we've got Andrew, who's on the
That seems like a
Google
good-
Meet.
That seems like a good question for the landscape architect. So,
Yeah.
of the trees we're seeing, what's already there, what would be planted, and when you're planting them, I mean, what are you planting? Are you planting 5-foot trees that in 100 years will grow to be this size, or are you planting these trees for now?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing we're going to do is work with Bartlett Tree in order to preserve as many of the trees in existing condition as possible, because they are, as Michael mentioned earlier, extremely tall and bring a lot of character to the site. In terms of the trees that we'll be planting, it'll be a combination of sizes. I think we would want to vary them based on the species. And again, we're going to want to try to introduce a lot more species variation than even what's on the site right there. But typically, we would be looking at multi-stems in probably a 12 to 15 foot range, and then single stem trees, deciduous trees in a 3-inch caliper up to 5-inch caliper. And we would vary it again to try to get some of that variation so that it doesn't look like it was all planted the same day.
Yeah, my point is, and I think you put a lot of thought into it, so I'm not at all trying to critique that, but this is a fake picture. It's not going to look like this when this thing is done. If it ever looks like this, it's going to be 10 years down the road after it's done. And that's part of the problem. What I have is that it just isn't going to look exactly like this with the landscaping there, but you're leading with that, and that concerns me because what else is going to be different? But there's no way in the world it will look like that. It just won't. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen a lot of pretty pictures, and they never look that good. And this is obviously you're not going to be able to do what you want there in the beginning. I mean, that's having a 40-foot tree covering up the building there is just not going to happen.
Well, what trees are there right now? I mean,
There's no way in the world you could have a tree that tall, that close to the building and retain it. And it's not going to look like they're old birches there. It's a fake picture.
Yeah, so similar, I would say, similar to the way that I think John has really eloquently expressed the architecture. This is a vision of sort of a long-term development. So this is not the exact landscape plan. This is aspirational. And I think it's important also to note that it's a long phased project. So the project will be executed over a period of time. This edge we would imagine would be one of the first areas that we would address. And so as a tree that goes in at a 3-inch caliper in an earlier phase, by the end of the development, it's going to be significantly different over time than the way it goes in. But correct, it's not going to be a 40-foot tree going in, exactly.
Yeah, and again, I get it that you're trying to do that, but the problem is the visuals are the captivating thing. Oh my God, this looks fantastic. But that's not what you're going to get. That's the concern that I have. Moving on, how long is the first set of buildings? Like, how long is the continual stretch of 4-story buildings, how far does it go?
The longest distance without a break is about 200 to 250 feet.
Okay, and can you show where that is on the other thing, just so I'm clear? So that's about 250 feet.
This parking garage, I'm sorry, the parking garage that you see here is 120 feet wide.
Yeah,
So that is about 180 feet wide. These front edges are
Oh.
about 180 feet wide.
okay.
The
And
depth
then there's
of
a space
the depth of the
of,
block is 250.
Okay, so the break between the two sets of buildings before you go in the main entrance, how wide is that? Not there, just to the right of there. Like, you said there's a break, it was, like, if it's 180, 120, and 180, that's 360 and 120, 480 feet straight of building, right? Or the yellow one, the parking garage, and the orange one.
That would be 180 plus about 300. Yeah, it's about 480
Okay,
feet
so it's
total
480
length.
feet straight, 30 feet off of 114 of 400.
Yes.
Eight,
And
okay.
roll the video forward just a little bit. I want to
Yeah,
call your
okay,
attention
yeah,
that
if
that's
you
not
can,
a,
please, yeah.
that is broken by a 30-foot passage, a paseo or an alley, which if you can freeze it right there.
There. Now, where is that on the,
There's one here and one here.
okay.
They line the eastern edge of both garages.
And then if,
So is that concrete, like sidewalks, so people could walk in and out of that?
With an alley of trees, 2 trees on either side, a path along the edge of the garage to help you go from the main residential street up to 114 and back and forth. We want to make these blocks permeable we want to make this walkable.
And are these connector, I mean, I really like the connectors between the garages. Are those open or are those covered?
They're open,
Even in the winter? I mean, that's.
even in the winter. Yes. I mean, perhaps ultimately, at your suggestion, we would cover them. Maybe we would even put them in behind glass. But the garage is not heated, it's open air. And so the thought is that the connections to get into the particular floors would also be open.
That screams icy water, rain. I mean,
That's why we hire
yeah,
at very great
yeah,
expense
yeah,
the good architects.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
that
Well,
doesn't
the
happen.
personal
But
injury
understood.
attorney in me is loving it, but
Understood,
that,
understood.
that seems risky. Architecture.
Point well made, point well made.
Okay, continue, John.
so then keep on going with let's keep on moving it. That pathway is just on one side or is it on both
It's
sides?
on one side of each garage.
Okay, so then going to, if you can scroll the tape forward.
Again, the circly,
Uh,
spinny circle. So where we turned into the property, is that where the traffic light would be? Is that the only?
It's actually at in the video, it's the next intersection past
Okay.
that is where the
So
traffic.
this is what we just passed, okay?
Yes.
Now we're coming to the other side, okay, and it's flush on with the building.
That's
Okay.
correct, yeah, it
Yeah,
connects
and
directly
it
to the
keeps
building.
on going, so that's the second one. Then, when this building ends, is that a travel path, or is it the space between the buildings there? Yeah,
That's the street.
that's a street. And that's not a signalized intersection, right?
No, that's right in, right out only.
Right in, right out only, okay.
So all the length, that's kind of what I was getting to. All the length that we've been going so far, there's no signalization. So if you're driving on 114, you're just driving straight, right?
Right,
correct,
and
yes.
I'll take that opportunity to interject. One of the reasons why we think that 35 feet is the right dimension for these buildings to be set back is it's subliminal, but it's proven. By bringing them closer to the street, we actually calm the street. It functions less as a highway, more as a street. Your brain slows the car down. You don't press the accelerator as hard. So we think that's a benefit, not a detriment.
I mean, it's
Is
similar
that a general, I mean, that's an interesting point. The more, if you don't mind sort of
Sure.
is that generally done in sort of what I'm gonna say, lower scale, lower height, like old-fashioned high streets to calm the traffic, or how, like, I mean, at some point, if you have something over a certain, when does it work and when doesn't it work?
I think it works in both cases. It's certainly just the perception that there's people, there's landscape, there's buildings in your peripheral vision, you slow down. And we think what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a prototypical New England village here, and transforming the nature of 114. And this is one of the devices we're using to do that. The large windows that allow light to spill out in the evening help to make this feel more residential. And I think it will transform the nature of 114.
I mean, I've seen it with, when you have on-street parking, it's a similar
Yes,
effect.
exactly.
Now, I don't want on-street parking here on 114, but when you have that kind of activeness and closeness of other things to the street, you kind of do get that sense that, hey, this isn't 50 miles per hour. Now,
Right.
traffic
agree
may
with
do that itself too,
Yeah.
At certain times of day, traffic's going to do that anyway for you. But, I mean, I think it is important to note that, kind of as you're talking about, though we have a long series of buildings, that will mostly be pass-through traffic continuing to go without stop. I mean, hopefully.
Okay. So now as this is a 5-story building here,
Yes,
right?
now the attic
Okay.
is occupied.
Okay, got it, okay.
And people
So
are
that's the second.
And which building is that?
looking at this corner.
this
What,
corner right
can you
there.
tell us what that is on the program summary? What
That
letter,
is
alphanumerical?
That's building D2.
D2, okay. So D2 says 4 stories, right?
D2, yeah.
That's what it says, so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, that's not right.
See, that's why we're doing this.
That's a transcription error, most likely.
So those-
D2 and D1 are both 5 stories along 114.
Okay, so let's correct that. That's why we're doing it. Okay, so why have so here we have the 67 feet to the top of the occupiable space, right?
That's correct.
So why have the pitched roof here, right? I guess just because, there is kind of a big difference between 67 feet and 80 feet, That's really kind of adding on. So why, tell us what, I guess,
Well,
why you like that?
I think it's a visual device to lower the perceived height of the building. If you look in the back of this view we have on the screen now, you see the 5th story going up with a flat roof. And to my eye, that back piece looks a lot taller than the front piece, even though they're both 5 stories. Frankly, the one in the back is less expensive to construct. The one in the foreground is more expensive, but we felt like it was the right kind of datum to maintain along 114, and it provided the more prototypical New England vernacular of gabled ends and relatively steeply sloped roofs.
So you're 5 stories there. Now, the streetscape there is basically, if you said it's 180, 180, and 120, is the second set of buildings basically the same size?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so if you can keep on going, just a little bit more, okay. So that's the corner. 1, 2, 3. Now that's 5 stories the whole way. It goes to a
Yes,
flat
yes,
roof.
yes.
Okay, yeah, and so
Well,
it's
and
lower.
even
It's
that
just
flat thing is sloping, but gently. You can see it in
Yeah.
the background.
Oh,
You can
okay.
see how it's a shed dormer that
Yeah.
comes forward there.
Okay.
Then
And
we go
same thing with,
to the
yeah.
garage. And we worked hard to make the garages kind of read as buildings in their own right. This does not to my eye, read like a horizontal parking garage.
Yeah.
It's got a
Okay.
vertical proportion to it.
Can you stop for here,
Yeah.
Gene? So here's where you mentioned the small footprint grocer.
Yes, that's our intended target tenant.
Can you explain what that, just for the board, members of the public, what is that, or an example of that kind of establishment?
They're,
Not that what's going in
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
but what
it's-
kind
It
of
could
place?
be a Trader Joe's.
That kind of place?
Trader Joe's is the type of, retailer that's designed with that sort of space in mind and could accommodate.
So some
something like
small
that.
boutique, but grocery, not
Yeah, there are a lot of-
pharmacy or something like that.
a lot of grocers that are developing 15,000 square foot footprint prototypes now. And Trader Joe's has kind of pioneered that market segment, but there are other competitors as well.
Okay, but that type of
That type,
location.
Yes.
that
Okay.
type of business.
Okay, I just wasn't familiar with the term of what you were going for there. Okay. Is there parking then close to that? I mean, I imagine
Yes.
that would be one of the more active parking locations.
Right, and that parking is accounted for in the podium of that building and in the parking garage.
Is there a parking garage attached to that?
Yes,
building? Oh, okay.
if you back up, that parking garage that is attached is both residential and commercial use. So it's immediately adjacent to that grocer, which would be one of their requirements.
Okay.
And then when you go in on the main street there, on the right, is everything 5 stories the whole length of that? And how long is that
Of this one block, and
Yeah,
that's 250 feet.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, 5 stories.
Yes.
Is any of, I'm not sure if we got, if you know the details of this, like with this parking, none of this is like reserved parking, right?
That's correct.
It's
It's
just first
all
come, first
publicly
served.
accessible,
That's right.
24/7.
Yeah.
Convenience parking for the retail, for the town green, for visitors to the residence.
Obviously, there would be certain handicap requirements.
Yes.
ADA access, that kind of thing.
And what about in the parking garage? Are those reserved, or, you mentioned people could use it for the grocer? How would that work
Yeah,
for
the-
public access?
The grocer and retailers will want some parking labeled and nested for their exclusive use. I can't speak for you, Michael, or Aimco
Yeah.
about whether the resident spaces would be reserved or.
Yeah, at the very least, the residential and the retail parking would be separated. There'd be reserved retail parking and then separate residential parking. Likely, it wouldn't be assigned parking, but it may be. And in some properties, we do have assigned parking. But it's early days as far as, the exact operations. But we do know that there will be sufficient parking for each of the uses, and we'll be able to describe how that works. On the 9th, at the next meeting, we're gonna provide you with a chart that will show all of the parking, that will show each of the buildings, the parking for each of the buildings, how it'll function. It'll also show the total number of on-street parking spaces, and we'll also show circulation plans to show how you get to and out, into and out of all the parking, as well as for pedestrians and bicyclists.
In your experience, are these types of streets are usually allowed to park overnight, things like that?
Yes.
Generally, okay. Okay. These outdoor umbrellas and canopies, things like that, are those associated with any kind of cafes or restaurants, or are those just kind of public amenities?
My answer to that would be both.
Right.
You see right behind the umbrellas, this little brown trellis structure. We do think that a 2-acre park with this kind of density anchored by these uses, including the student residential, would support a freestanding kiosk that could house a Starbucks or something like that, something to activate that park. And there is a lot of hardscape shown there for that use to spill out, but these umbrellas would not be for the exclusive use of that cafe. They're general purpose use.
And then in the background is the hotel, correct?
Yes.
And I think you'd mentioned before, kind of one of the models was like the Hotel Viking in Newport. And
Yes.
I definitely see the resemblance there.
Yeah.
You got a 19.5 pitched roof, so again, going from 55 to 74.5. Can we get that? I guess, is the rationale behind that the same? Is it really just architectural, or is it functional?
Well, it is functional. The steeply sloping roof allows that fourth story up there to be occupied with those dormers. So it gives us the headroom we need to have that fourth story occupied. And it's good practice for snow and the weather we have here in New England.
But why 19.5 instead of the 12-inch that the other ones have? Or 12-foot, I'm sorry. So the other buildings have 12-foot pitched roofs. This one's 19.5.
Well, this is 12. It's in the 5-story building, from the top line of the cornice at the shed dormer to the roof is only 12 feet. It's a shallow pitch on the shed dormer. The primary pitch on all of those is a 12-12 pitch. So the secondary cornice line, the lower cornice line, even on the 5-story buildings, is down at 55. This one is, I think, where's the hotel on here?
It's at 55 to top occupiable space, 19.5 for pitched roof.
Yes. And so it rises, the hotel bar is a little bit wider, so it rises a little bit higher. But, yeah, I think that's the right math. 55 goes to 74.5. It's actually a little bit lower. The others top out at 79, so this one
Right.
tops out at 74.5.
But the other 4-story buildings top out at 67. I guess that's why I was...
The other 4-story buildings would also top out at somewhere between 74 and 79, because they're that same 12-12 pitch.
Okay, so that's not, again, that's
Yeah, I think we'll,
that's not what this says. It says 12-foot for pitched
Yeah.
roof, 67 total,
We'll,
so...
we'll circle back with the team and make sure that all these numbers are scrubbed and get reflective of the actual design.
Okay, yeah, we need to, but again, just note...
I know, we need
note
precision,
the-
we need
yes.
precision, and that's,
Yeah, I mean, I
apologize
know-
for that.
Okay.
So, actually, the thought occurred to me that, when you look at all these pictures of the public space, is it a single management company that's going to manage the entire parcel and support the entire parcel, or will the responsibility be carved up?
I would say that there's a couple of different options. I would say that it's likely that there's going to be different participants for different parts of the program. So there'll be different, it's anticipated that Aimco and Trinity are going to be involved in every aspect throughout the life of this, but we may have other, participants that will, like a hotel operator, for example. So yes, there will be a manager for the entire site that will sort of coordinate everything, but there may be other parties that are involved with different pieces of this.
And all the roads are private ways, all the trash pickups, all
That's
the...
correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
I guess, because one of the more challenging things always is shared public space, and who owns it, and who
Yep.
manages it, who takes care of it.
Yes.
Well, that's a good question. So if these are if I'm just a random resident of really anywhere, but let's just say North Andover,
Yep.
and I wanted to come and park and walk around here, is there any limitation on that?
I think we have to come up with the exact, operations and maintenance procedures for this, but, generally, yes, these would function as any other street, but, obviously we would patrol them, we would have security, we would have, we'd know what's going on, so if someone abandoned a car, we would know quickly. But yeah, so it's anticipated and intended that, people would come here, they would shop, they would park, they would leave. Some people may park longer term if they needed to.
Keep going, or does it go through again?
The only other, just a couple of context points, is that the second tranche of buildings that would be on the right, opposite the hotel, that's the same length as the first, or is it you know,
Yes.
that's the same as that,
Right.
okay, okay.
250 feet, plus or minus deep.
Now, I guess the other question I would have is the so-called rain garden or whatever. What is the size of that?
You're talking about the little one
The
beside of
thing
the...
on the right past the yellow building, just, yeah, that area there. Yeah, that is actually not wetlands where you can't go. What are we talking about?
Right, no, it's both. It is a reconstructed wetland. Some of the area in there will be constructed wetlands, but it's also preserved woodland that's there today and will remain. And just judging, we haven't broken out the 23-acre buffer by sector, but if this square is 3 acres, that's probably 5 or 6 acres of natural buffer, natural edge.
Okay, but, I mean, obviously, some of it you can't walk the part that's right on the periphery of the property, there are wetlands, right?
Yeah, I'll let you answer that, Michael. We
Yeah,
actually
that's right.
pulled
That's
pulled
right.
the trail away from the neighbors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So around the periphery of the site is natural woodland. It's what exists there today, and we're going to
Yeah.
be preserving that in nearly its entirety. In some locations, as we wanted this amenity, we do have this walking path that we've spent a lot of time designing. We've spent a lot of time listening to the neighbors, talking to the neighbors about it, to make sure that they understand what we're talking about, but also to hear their concerns. So if you recall, we had some earlier designs where that walking path got much closer to the property line. We've moved that in the more sensitive areas, we've moved that as far away from the property line as we could. In this area where there's the existing wetland, and we're actually expanding the wetlands, you can see there are no abutters for hundreds, 600 feet. So we actually utilize a little bit more of that land for the public amenity. And I know that we really spent a lot of time to make sure that this representation that you see is as accurate as it can be. So if you go, Gene, I don't know if you could fast forward, just for an example, if you could fast forward to the walking path at the end. So we've heard a lot of questions about the lighting for the walking path. And, we've worked with the landscape architect about what is the lighting actually going to be. We heard concerns about making sure that there's no lighting that sort of provides light contamination to the neighbors. So the earlier version of this actually had sort of standard overhead historic lighting, but, that's not what we want and it's not what was appropriate. So we actually went back and put the correct lighting that we intend to be there. So, we do think that this is going to be a very, very accurate representation of what will be built.
Peter, do you have anything you want to highlight or question or places you want to talk about on the video?
Yes, please. Thanks, Eitan. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah?
Yeah, first, I just want to note, I agree with John that walkways connecting the parking garage to the different levels of the buildings is very appealing. Connecting one building to another at height like that is a very efficient way to move people and avoids long ramps to the ground, which we've discussed at length in other locations here. And it's really great to see that type of efficient movement of people connecting at height to equivalent at height between two buildings. Really stuck out to me watching the video, and it's a nice touch. Although I agree with Eitan that there have to be some attention to ice, etc. I don't know that I saw the part of the video that went past the student dorms. Can we go to that point?
I don't think were the dorms kind of to the side. Did we see the dorms or not?
Yeah, there's a suggestion of them in the far background as we look across the town green. But that.
Can you show us where the suggestion is? Because I just didn't pick up on
Right
that.
there. You're just a little gap between the trees and right there. So
So-
that's the 5-story portion of the student residential. That's the height it would be, and roughly the window pattern that, you know, that repetitive module would have. But we have not engaged with Merrimack College and not begun the design of those buildings at all.
Yeah, so I'm a little surprised by that and just want to leave the note here for fellow board members. You know, my perspective here is understand it's a 1,000-person student dorm. Sounds to me like one of the largest buildings on the proposal, and I feel like we're really missing something here to have a video tour of proposed area and not include one of the largest buildings. It's occupancy that I think a lot of members of the community have expressed, comments about the student dorm in particular. So, at least to me, this is a missing that I hope we get some type of understanding of what that building is, how that fits in here, because we don't get it in the video. The other thing is really a question again for you, Eitan. My recollection is that you and the board asked for perspectives of structures, not only within the development, but I thought we specifically asked for perspectives from the surrounding neighborhoods. And
Yeah, I have a note.
Merrimack. And,
Yeah.
And it seems like with all the developments we've had, Eitan, that's a key aspect of understanding how this will look. So is the idea that that's coming, that
Yes.
was not to be part of the video?
Yes.
Yes, that is
Yep.
correct. And we have been working on that. It is, as you know, and as we've expressed, and as when we were on site, as you saw, it's difficult to get an accurate view of the buildings, considering some of the distances that we are talking about. But that said, for example, the student dorm, it's approximately, it's approximately 390 feet away from the property line, not even the houses. So it's 390 feet away from the backyards of the closest abutters on Berkeley Road, for example. The trees in that area are between 80 and 110
Can
feet.
I make a point there? 6
Yeah.
months a year, there's not leaves in the trees. And every picture we've seen is summertime. So there's, it's not going to look like that half the year. Half the year, just because the trees are higher, people are going to be able to see the buildings.
No, understood, but
Yeah.
it's still dense woodland, so even with no trees, I mean, we've got, that said, we're trying to get as accurate a representation. We're putting that together now. This represents, it's a 3D model of this plan with the exact heights, and, we should be able to give you something that gives you that perspective.
So
Yeah,
yes.
look, Eitan,
We're
let me follow up on this if I could. Is all right? Can I make a brief comment here, Eitan?
Well, I just say that I expect those kind of view corridor pictures from neighborhoods that I think our expectation is known and that's being worked on. It wasn't intended to be, as I understand, part of this video, but there will be a subsequent, whether it's photographs
Okay.
or
Good.
it's
And
coming.
look,
up.
I can appreciate
Yeah.
that, there's a significant setback, but Eitan, I think our experience with other developers, we've had significant distances where they've succeeded in giving us the perspective from the street or from neighborhoods. So again, I think we do appreciate that there's some challenges there, but, I think we're all sure that you're up to it. So to see those. I do have one other question for the architect, and I apologize, I'm skipping on your name here, but for the presentation and the explanation, I did write down one of your comments. You said that architecturally you're create a prototypical New England village. We've heard that term before. I think it's appropriate to pose this question to you as the architect. These 4-story buildings 35 feet from a roadway, are in Somerville, Cambridge, Lawrence, Lowell, not in a bad way. I mean, there are terrific sections that are really pleasant to drive through and visit. But the very specific question for you is, what prototypical New England village modeling after? Which village in what location? Because, again, we've heard this for the last year, and we've asked before, and I don't think anyone's answered. What prototypical New England village looks like this?
I think early on in the process, we have provided some precedents from places in Massachusetts and Connecticut and Maine and New Hampshire as well. And we can show you those images again at a future date. I don't have them in this deck, but Storrs, Connecticut comes to mind as one. Hanover, New Hampshire. We've looked at a lot of college towns. The Dartmouth Green has a lot of the same characteristics that this town green has. I think Amesbury, Main Street in Amesbury was one of our precedents. Beth, you might remind me of some others.
So can I stop you there? So Peter, I know we've had this discussion before, so to an extent, I understand why you're asking it because they're using that terminology, but I guess my focus is more on actually how this is looking, and to me, it actually when you say kind of college town, when I think of Hanover, this is what I think of. So I don't see it as New England Village Green. I see it as small college town. Yeah. Now, you may be avoiding that because maybe that's not the pitch that you think would work here. I think it should work here. Whether it will or not, I don't know. But to me, this is a small college town. It's off of a main highway. It's pretty self-enclosed. It's got residential units. It's got retail. It's got a potential grocery store. I do see this as a small college town within a town, right? Personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I don't know. It looks to me like the local examples are, Somerville, Cambridge. It looks very urban. In fact, that was the thing. I like the architecture, but it's very urban. I mean, this reminds me, to give another example, you may not be familiar with it, but this feels to me like some of the large apartment complexes that are built in Denver behind Coors Stadium. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's my daughter lived in one of those, so I'm familiar with that. But that's what it feels like. It feels like very much like a neighborhood like that, which is urban. It's great. It's perfect. But this is North Andover. There's no five-story buildings in North Andover.
Okay. There aren't now, but why? Hold on, Peter. We'll get to you. But I guess my point is, why can't there be? Just because there haven't been in the past, why does it mean? Just because in one part of North Andover, I guess I just don't understand why there can't be a 4-story, 5-story building, or why there can't be something that has more of an urban type feel in a part of North Andover. It seems to me that North Andover has over 30,000 people in it. And it's not the small town that it used to be. Now, we can still talk about different densities and things like that, but I guess I just struggle with the notion that because there aren't anything else like this in town, that there can't be something like this.
So Eitan, let me respond to some of the comments that you've made. And by the way, I think they're very helpful, so thank you. One of the reasons that I'm asking this question, I think the way the applicant is characterizing this as a prototypical New England village is somewhat similar to John's comment about how we're seeing a very well done video with clusters of 40-foot trees. is not a real depiction. And I think as a town board, we do have an obligation to challenge an applicant when there may be a characterization which does not reflect reality. And the applicant can market this any way they want. We've had lots of discussions with them, encouraging them to be about this. But it's up to them to market it the way they want. But I think part of our role here is if we see something that just isn't realistic, I think we need to challenge it to at least get on the record our, neighbors here in North Andover to say, challenging this characterization. And we're challenging it in a way that I think is quite fair. We're just asking that. And I agree with you, Eitan. There's nothing wrong with the feel of a college town. I mean, quite nice. But I also agree with John that the 4- and 5-story buildings you don't see around the green in Dartmouth. You see green in Dartmouth, but they're surrounded by 4- and 5-story buildings like this. It is urban. Your point, Eitan, sure, North Andover could to an urban location, but I think the reason it's very important for us to have a discussion of this is I think I can characterize the bylaws as basically saying that this fits within the character of the town. And right now, the reason we're asking these questions is because it's a little hard to see how this urban proposal surrounding a small green, how this urban feel fits within the character of North Andover. It just is hard to see right now.
Okay, I guess my point is that I think that I guess I'm not sure that I like the word character, but the size, the scope of the town is changing. And so the question is, does something like this fit in, and can it be adapted to, and can it make better the town? Even if it doesn't exactly squarely fit with what's here now, is this better? And I think that's the question that ultimately a town meeting has to answer, and that we have to be satisfied with. And maybe this doesn't. But I just want to make the point that it doesn't necessarily have, because we're creating new zoning too, right? So the question is not necessarily does it exactly correlate with what we have and what's been in the past, but should this be part of the future? And can we have somewhere in town that's somewhat self-isolated, that gives us all these housing benefits that we need, and still maintain the downtown experience, still maintain the out-country experience, still maintain the commons, still maintain all these different parts of town that have in themselves different feel, right? I mean, 114 right now has a different feel than if you're on Salem Street or if you're on Johnson Street. So I get what you're saying with what we're seeing, and somewhat take it with a grain of salt. I mean, I think the fact that there are parts of this summary that need to be corrected, does give me pause, but I think we all get a certain feel from this, and the ultimate question is that something that we can recommend to the town as being a future benefit? That's kind of where I'm coming.
Yeah, and I think you have nicely framed this. I really do, Eitan. And I'm not surprised that you framed it so nicely. To me, I would take all the points. Can North Andover benefit from mixed use, having these corner grocers, having a range of different housing that is a little different than the rest of the town? But we spent a year talking about why does it have to be binary? Why does it have to be, we're not going to do this, or we're going to do it at this extreme urban density? Why can't we have all those things that you just framed, Eitan, with 3-story buildings? Why can't we have them with a density where we don't have to trade off the distance to 114 with the distance to the neighborhoods, because we're trying to pack so much in there? And the answer we keep getting is it has to be, sure, there's been some reduction, 3 out of 15 buildings are 1 story less, but it's still binary. It's big, it's dense. This is how we're going to make it look like a prototypical New England town. That's wait.
Okay, I mean, that point is well taken.
If I can just
Oh,
add one comment.
Let me see, John, did anyone else have anything?
No, I would appreciate it if you.
Yeah,
if,
it's certainly not binary. However, density does lead to vitality, and we're trying to put enough density here that we can actually support these small footprint retail shops. People will not drive long distances to go to a small 1,000 square foot shop. Even at 13,000, 15,000 square feet, small footprint grocer here does not have a big catchment area. And so in order for that retail to work, in order for that square to be active and have those people in it, it's largely a function of the number of residential units within a very walkable distance, about 1,250 feet, about the length of our main residential street. So there is a benefit to the additional density. Still not saying whether it's for you to determine whether that's 5 stories is too high, but it is a thoughtful proposal on our part that we feel this is the housing density that we need to make this the active, vibrant place that we all want it to be. So that's my.
Okay. And just to other members of the board or members of the public, and this is not an easy kind of call, I think, for anybody. I mean, this is a really challenging site with a really different proposal than we're used to, and it goes very far. And I think Peter's point is well taken about how, trying to see if we can find kind of the right balance of all of these different things. I mean, the one thing I've been thinking about recently is I'm not sure that there's a perfect answer. So I think ultimately, I think there's still work to do, but the question may be, is it good enough? Is it not good enough? And how do we vote on that? But I think this video and this data was a step in the right direction. What I'd like to see is the view corridors from different properties looking in, whether that's from actual pictures or from simulations. I mean, I'll leave that up to you. I mean, we've seen actual pictures from in projects. We've seen simulations, like the cell tower project did simulations, and they did them from very far away. So there's different ways to do that. I'll leave that to you guys, but we do want to see that. I'd like to see the summary chart, kind of, as Peter talked about, we had talked about, just, it doesn't have to necessarily be on the same chart, but also comparing to what's there now with these same categories, with number of units, number of trips, things like that. So we can say, okay, what's now? What was the original plan? What's the current plan? And have all those to be able to compare. If you can't do it on one chart, so be it. That's okay. We can have 2 pieces of paper in front of us. That's okay. We can use actual paper. And then, what do we have planned for next, Jean?
So it sounds like Mike talked about parking ratios, circulation plans, sidewalks, things like that.
Okay.
As you stated, we still have updating to the fiscal impact, update to the traffic study. We are going to peer review the preliminary design for stormwater, so I did just hear back from her today. We're going to set up an escrow account and have her at least do a preliminary peer review for stormwater design that I would hope would be turned around within a month or so.
And I'd love to hear public comments about people's reactions to the video, things that struck them, that they liked, that they didn't like. I think that would certainly be helpful. Did we have any public comments?
Yes, we have one.
Well, we also had one before, right?
Right.
So I want to get to that as well. So, but why don't we get to the one that came in just about this, and then I do want to get to the public comment we had before.
Okay, so this was received by Jeremy Young at 9:15. Said, hi, I would like to know if there will be deeding that protects the property from being transferred to Merrimack College. Jeremy Young, 29 South Bradford Street.
deeding that protects it from being transferred to Merrimack College. I don't believe that there's anything in the current proposed bylaw with deed restrictions about the sale of any particular buildings. There will be, use restrictions, or, we have, residential uses, certain other retail uses, things like that. But no, not
I
that
would
I'm
say
aware of.
the potential, there could be discussions within the development agreement
Okay.
associated with that, but that, as far as I know, that has not started those discussions.
Okay, so there, yeah, it's rare that we put exclusions like that. Sometimes we'll do it to exclude certain uses. So we'll make a business district, but say, okay, we don't want, an automobile dealership or a mechanic shop or something that's heavy machinery, something like that. It's rare that we have restrictions as to who ultimately the property can be sold to, but there would be restrictions in the plans about, changing the nature of the building or the projects, and that would have to either come back to the planning board or come back to town meeting and things like that. If it's a tax question, then that would probably be, if that's kind of where he's going with it, then that would probably be more something in the development agreement about ensuring certain tax revenues and things like that. Okay, so, good question. There was another comment, Jean, that I think you answered, but I just wanted to address.
Yep, so that comment was included in your packet. I sent what I prepared for a response for your consideration. So the comment was received by Mary Lou Shellman on Friday. I don't know if you want to read that into the record?
Sure, if you could do that.
Sure.
I don't have it, I was trying to look for it, I don't have it in front of me.
So Mary Lou Shellman sent a message to myself as well as the planning board. As a resident who lives adjacent to Rural Crest, I have taken a great interest in the proposed development of that property. The following is a resubmittal of questions I have asked in writing more than once, but to which I have received no answer to date. If an answer has been provided at a public meeting which I have been unable to attend, please direct me to the minutes where the answer will be found. I intend to keep asking these questions, which I feel are central issues for the development in town. When we and various neighbors have wanted to expand our homes or add small sheds to a property, we have been required to adhere to existing zoning. I believe the owners of Rural Crest property have the right to develop their property to its best use, provided that they too are required to adhere to existing zoning. I feel this is especially important in this location. Unlike other recently approved large housing developments such as Princeton Development, the Royal Crest site is not surrounded by business and/or commercial zoning. The Royal Crest property is surrounded by residential zoning, except where it abuts Route 114. The Royal Crest property is zoned residential. Accordingly, my questions are, why are the developers not being asked to submit a proposal compliant with existing? And my response for the board's consideration to that is the property owner/developers have asked for the planning board's consideration of a zoning bylaw amendment to allow for a redevelopment of Rural Crest Estates. This type of request is not uncommon, as recent requests for planning board-sponsored zoning bylaw amendments were made by the property owners and developers for the Princeton Properties / Signature Commons project, Edgewood Retirement Community Woodlands Inn project, Sutton Street redevelopment / Senior Center project, and the establishment of the Downtown Overlay Historic Mill Area Subdistrict, a bylaw that allowed for the redevelopment of the mill area under the new zoning. On a much smaller scale, consideration for a zoning bylaw amendment and zoning map amendment were also recently requested by the owners of 187 Turnpike Street and 1874 Turnpike Street. This list is not all-inclusive, but rather meant to show a common practice. Although the request for consideration of the bylaw amendment is made to the planning board, if the planning board is supportive of sponsoring a town meeting warrant article, their responsibility is to make a recommendation to town meeting. The article would then require town meeting approval. In addition, the town encourages planning principles that promote rational, economical, and environmentally efficient use of land to allow North Andover to grow in a manner consistent with the goals of the community. In May 2021, the Master Plan Implementation Committee presented its third quarter progress report on activities and implementation of master plan strategies and recommendations to the planning board. After a review of the Rural Crest redevelopment proposal, the committee did some background work on outlining a process whereby the committee could evaluate projects with respect to the master plan and bring this evaluation forward to the select and planning boards. This evaluation included a call-out of 17 master plan goals/strategies, whereby the redevelopment project proposal was reported as aligned with the master plan on either a positive, 11 strategies, neutral, 2 strategies, or in progress, 4 strategies manner.
And so, I mean, and I think that's a great answer, but to
Yeah.
kind of to summarize, you know, if a lot of the stuff, if they were doing it within the zoning, a lot of it's by right, they wouldn't need to come to the planning board for some of it, right? Some of the things require special permits that they could do
Yep.
R5, but there's a whole bunch of different uses in that current zoning. There's a whole, long list, which I think you provided, of
Yep.
different potential uses for what they could do now. But it's not uncommon for a property owner to come before town meeting and say, my property, things have changed in town or my property, and the zoning that's currently there isn't adequate. Let's change it. Now, we talked about some of those bigger projects, but there've also been smaller ones on Middlesex Street, on Turnpike Street, where the current zoning really wasn't as beneficial as potential change zoning, so a change in zoning was requested and approved or not approved, as the case may be.
And the process for those was the same as this. Advance of town meeting, come describe the project to the planning board and present it and request sponsorship. So the second question is, what aspects of the proposal are not compliant with current zoning? So current residential 5, zoning for buildings and uses permitted along with current dimensional requirements, which is table 2, are attached. A proposed bylaw amendment to allow for a mixed-use overlay district is currently being considered by a zoning working group. The uses being discussed that are not included in the current R5 zoning are listed in the attached mixed-use overlay district proposed uses memo. So again, that's attached and included in the packet. Dimensional requirements are being evaluated. The program summary has recently been revised. There's been a reduction in units, reduction in some building heights, increased setbacks in some locations. Amendments will likely be necessary for building heights/stories, building setbacks, floor area ratios, lot coverage, and Table 2 footnotes 1, 2, 7, and 12. And again, all that information is separate documents in the packet. And the third question is, what would a compliant proposal look like? In essence, limit on number of units, uses allowed. The response is a compliant proposal would meet the current permitted uses allowed and dimensional requirements for the R5 zoning district. The redevelopment project, as proposed, requires zoning bylaw amendments and a zoning map amendment. So essentially, they're not proposing something compliant, it's just.
Right, so I mean, there'd really be an infinite amount of possibilities of different plans you could draw up that comply with the zoning. Buildings in different places, different uses that are currently allowed. Do you have a list of the R5 of what's allowed there?
Yep, everything's in the packet, so I can bring that up, but,
Yeah, if you could bring
but
that
there
up.
would be, I mean, if the proposal was demolish the entire site, swimming pools are allowed, tennis courts are allowed, multifamily, single family, all that's allowed, so there could be
Golf
a
course?
mix, a golf course is allowed.
Have you guys thought about a golf course?
I don't know if that counts as a mini golf course would be allowed, but,
Ooh, a mini golf
yeah,
haven.
we had one a long time ago. So what's there today is obviously townhomes, multifamily, residential use, but it could be a combination. It could be a church. It could be 200 of the units could remain supplemented with, like you said, a tennis court, golf course, indoor swimming,
Agriculture. I mean, there's, I guess the point.
museums,
Yeah.
educational facilities, cemetery, rooming houses.
It's quiet neighbors at
multifamily
least.
homes. A hotel and a motel is allowed, or a motel is allowed in R5 today as well. So a developer could propose all this and propose it within the existing dimensional requirements, but I can't lay that out on paper. That takes engineering and a team like this to
But so.
visualize that.
Good amount of the things that are proposed in this proposal are allowed there, either by special permit or by right? We have residential, we have hotel. Now, they're different sizes, different dimensions, different setbacks, so that's all changing. I think it's really the retail, the retail and the restaurant that are really the ones that are not really called out in the current zoning.
As well as professional and business office use.
Okay. But I mean, but all the sizes are being proposed, so I mean, really, it's a whole new proposal. So I'm not really sure that there's much benefit to comparing it to what's allowed there now, but I think it's still a good answer to the question. And I know Michelle has been very involved in asking questions, so we appreciate that, and hopefully this helps answer some of those questions.
Hey, Ton, I have what I think is a quick follow-up question for Mike, if I could.
Sure.
Yeah, Mike, so I think you mentioned tonight that we've been at this with you and the planning board for, I guess it's about a year. And one of the things you have mentioned to us in a number of these meetings that has been very helpful, and I think everyone appreciated, is that you've actually been talking with the town for quite a bit longer. I think you've told us in the past that it's been for 3 years. So what group in the town, beyond your more recent discussions with the planning board, what groups in the town have you been due diligence with for this 3-year period?
It's hard to list them, honestly. I mean, as I mentioned, I mean, the 90 meetings, 90 plus meetings is probably on the very conservative side, and it's likely much more than that if you go back the entire 3 years. But we've met with single homeowners in their kitchen. We've met with groups of homeowners in a neighbor's kitchen, up to like 6 to 10 of them. We've had Zoom calls. I mean, it's been a little bit difficult over the last year with COVID, but we've had Zoom calls with over 100 abutters and people interested. Obviously, we've met with you guys dozens of times at this point, which we appreciate, but we've also met with the Conservation Commission. We've met with the Sustainability Committee in town. We've met before the Select Board many times. We've met with church groups. The Unitarian Church, for example, we've met with a group of interested residents that are members of the Unitarian Church. We've met with the Merchants Association several times, and individual business owners, groups of business owners, the entire Merchants Association. So that's just some of them, but we've really been trying to get out there to anybody that's got an interest, that wants to know more about it, or has any concerns, and we'll continue to do that.
So going to that broad group is very important. I think everyone, I guess I was asking more.
On the town side?
On the town side, if you go back 3 years, who are you engaging with? I'm not saying the name of the people, but what entity within the town government?
So,
The Affordable Housing Trust, the Master Plan Implementation Committee are two more that come to mind.
Yep.
Town manager, planning department, community development department,
The DPW.
DPW.
All of the departments, the fire department, the police department, the school department.
And that was all as part of the fiscal impact
Right.
analysis, all those departments.
And even beyond that was just one part of the meetings with them.
So Mike, if you go back to year 1 of year 3, in that first year that you were engaging with the entities in the town, that was the point that you were talking to the fire department and police department?
Yes. We were talking to many of those groups. I mean, over time, we've reintroduced ourselves. We've reintroduced the project. We've presented the changes. But yes, we've been meeting with people in town consistently for 3 years.
Peter, anything else?
No, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to have these discussions and ask these questions, and nice job, Eitan.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Any other comments come in, Gene, or is that?
Let me check.
I hesitate to ask.
They did no other comments have come in.
Okay. Have we officially made September 9th our next meeting?
Yes, we have.
Okay. So we'll continue our discussion.
As a reminder, that's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday, September 9th, 7 o'clock here.
Yes.
Okay. And I thank you for your patience and diligence. Thank you, board members, for your patience and hard work.
Yeah.
I appreciate
And
that.
we've taken good notes, so we'll
Okay.
be in touch with all of those answers.
Okay, all right, so can we get a motion to approve the minutes from the July 20th meeting?
Motion to approve minutes.
Guys, we're still, just let us finish, please, thank you. Motion to approve the minutes made by Ozer? Second. All in favor, Peter?
He says yes.
He says yes?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
he says aye. Alyssa?
Yes.
John?
Aye.
Aye as well.
Gar.
Okay. Okay, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Go, Peter made the motion. Sorry, John. And second, what I said. Peter, vote?
Aye.
Alyssa?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I vote yes. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.